My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. I'm only here to even the score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. I'm down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is on up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is on up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 43. And yes, last week I got it wrong. It wasn't 43. It was actually 42. I did correct it in the comments, but sadly, I was one episode ahead. However, as a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF National Champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star, shooting the breeze, talking UCF Sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, and check out all of the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle, which we are a part of and excited to be. Just dropped another Big 12 nugget a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be on an upcoming show. And some of our compatriots here, like Josh Lazar, may be making an appearance on a show in the near future. So we're spreading our wings. But for this week, we get to talk a little bit more recruiting. This was the last recruiting weekend before the dead period. So there's some exciting news about that. We'll talk a little bit about all these projections that are coming out, where UCF is slated to be and what everybody's saying. And are we a dark horse candidate? We'll also be talking about the Big 12 changing their name, potentially. Private equity in the Big 12. A little UCF basketball news. We had a prediction a little while ago about a certain someone, Johnny Dawkins, that came to be true. And then Josh may or may not grace us with his sometimes funny fact of the week. So without further ado, let's bring in the crew. Nobra, the producer, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey now.
Hey now. And he got it right. See what happens? Like last week, you weren't here. I got the wrong episode number. I'm just lost without you, man.
It's okay. I'm here to save everybody.
Thanks, man. All right, give me a hair flip. There it is. All right. Next to the stage, Ben Stout with a new background.
What's up? What's up? Couple weeks off. I'm excited to be back with everybody, and yeah, man, talk some UCF sports. It'll be great.
Yeah. So like, hats off. We both have our themed backgrounds there. Mine's always covered by my chair.
Nice.
Can't go wrong with Merca and UCF Sports. And congratulations to your son for being a World Series champion. That's why we missed him last week. He was off watching his son be another stellar athlete. So we can't wait until he's at UCF in college. So,
oh, he would love that. He would love that, and I would too.
All right.
Got quite a few years till then.
Well, he might still play for Coach Wally. You never know.
That'd be great.
All right. And last but not least, but always last, my good friend, Josh Lazar.
It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine, hanging pictures on my wall, every set attack, rap attack, Mr. Magic Barley Mall. I let my tape rock till my tape pop, smoking a bamboo, sipping on private stock, way back when I had a rhythm back lumberjack with the hat to match. Remember rapping Duke? The hard, you never thought hip hop would take it this far. Now I'm in the limelight cause I rhyme tight, time to get paid, blow up like the no way, born sinner, the opposite of a winner. Remember when I used to eat sardines for dinner? Peace to Ron G, Brucey Bree, Kid Capri, Funk Master Flex, jump above soft ski. I'm blowing up like you thought I would. Call the crib, saying number, same good is all good. And
all
if
right.
you don't know, now you know. Made a commitment to Eastern Michigan. I don't know if we are going to talk about that in the chat today.
What? Eastern Michigan? What?
Noah.
Noah?
Do you know Noah? He was going to go to Western Virginia. I remember his last name though, which is kind of. I remember his last name.
No, bro. Are you turning tail on us? What's going on right now? Are you talking about Ben's Noah? Are you talking about Ben's Noah?
We're talking about someone who just committed to Eastern Michigan that we are not saying his full name on the show. So let's just continue. Let's blow past this.
No one. Okay, maybe it's just me.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess you guys will have to figure that one out in the chat and hit me up. So, Nobra, this week, before I let you go, I do want to tell you. That Noah. Okay. Yep. We're not saying that on this show. Okay. I got it. It took me a minute.
That was a double. That was a double that you just didn't get. It's okay.
Because we have a Noah on the show, I was like, did Noah go from UCF? Is he transferring to Eastern Michigan or something? Like, what's going on right now?
No. Noah Naysayer, I think, is what he uses in his Twitter.
Yeah, Noah Naysayer. Gotcha. All right. So, Nobra, this week, you got to bring your A game with the scrolls at the bottom of the screen because last week was pretty hilarious. If you guys missed those, we can't always say what we're saying in the private chat, but definitely check those out. So, Nobra, bring your A game this week. I expect you to pick up and make fun of us this entire show.
Gotcha.
All right. Let's get started. A little bit of UCF football recruiting. And not just a little bit, but a lot of it. This was the last weekend, as I said, for recruiting before we go into the dead period. We had a lot of, we saved the best for last, really. We had some pretty big recruits on campus the last time we talked about recruiting last week. But this week, just right out the gate, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there. It looks like we may have 2 to 3 flips. And on top of that, at least another 2 to 3 commitments. So very successful week from what everybody has said. And let me just throw some of the names on here. Javion Hilson. If you don't remember him, he's from Cocoa. He's 6'3.5", defensive lineman, 235. 94, rated a 94 by 247. He's a 4-star, number 44 nationally. So when we're talking about the top 250, we're talking about of all recruits, number 44 nationally, and the number 3 edge in the country. He had 37 offers. He's committed to FSU. So he still does have a visit next weekend to not next weekend, but the next available weekend to FSU. He's only taken 3 visits. And this is his offer list: FSU, UF, Texas, Bama, Arkansas, Colorado, Georgia Tech, Illinois, Indiana, UK, Louisville, LSU, Miami, Ohio State, Penn State, Pitt, Hughes, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and USC. Some of the interviews have him coming back to UCF for an unofficial visit. Obviously, he's out of Cocoa, and the guys that we already have on the team have been hitting him up and have been doing a little bit of hinting around. So I think at the very least, we have a good shot with Javion Hilson. So that's exciting. RJ Jones, 5'11.5", 165-pound cornerback from Vero Beach. He was firmly committed to NC State. He's an 86 3-star, but on 247, the number 112 cornerback, number 140 in Florida, 25 offers. NC State, Auburn, Florida, Illinois, Iowa State, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Louisville, Miami, Mizzou, Pitt, West Virginia. And he just deleted all of his NC State commitment info. Why RJ Jones is important, not only is a good player in his own right, however, he is also teammates with another guy that we're trying to get, which is TJ Alford. He's a defensive lineman, 6'2", 210. He's from Vero Beach. He's a linebacker. He's a 4-star, and he's currently committed to Ohio State. Now, remember when I was talking about flips earlier? I'm just sprinkling that in there. Number 72 nationally. So we've talked about the number 3 player nationally and the number 72 player nationally that was on UCF's campus this weekend. He has 34 offers: Colorado, FSU, Illinois, Auburn, Baylor, Duke, Florida, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Indiana, Iowa State, UK, Louisville, Maryland, Miami, Michigan, NC State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and West Virginia U. Now, these obviously, if you can count, that was not 34 offers. I don't speak that fast. I'm not like Josh with my rap skills yet. So, but the important thing that I'm trying to push out here is these are some big time players that we have legitimate shots at that are coming to UCF. This is not the recruiting days of old. And when I say legitimate shot, I'm not saying, hey, they're doing a courtesy visit for the free steak and trip to Iowa and everything else.
The cookie cake. Can't forget.
Yeah, this is not Trey's cookie cake visit, right? So, so the big thing, which he, by the way, ate in one sitting, the big thing here with R.J. Jones and T.J. Alford is T.J. Alford is a huge commit. Like, he would be a huge commit. R.J. Jones is a solid commit too. I mean, that would be a great for our class. But if we can get both of them, that would be phenomenal. Jarquez Carter, 6'2", 284, linebacker. Again, you see, I'm sorry, not linebacker, defensive lineman. We're going after defensive lineman now, trying to bone up on that from Newberry. He's a 3-star 88, but on 247, but a composite 4-star. So another 4-star recruit. He's the number 43 defensive lineman in the country and has 57 offers, or 36 offers, including Florida, Penn State, Bama, Cincy, Colorado, Duke, FSU, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Indiana, Louisville, LSU, Miami, Michigan, Minnesota, Mizzou. He was also offered by NC State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, USC, and Washington. So again, this guy's a composite 4-star, but you can tell from his offer list, those are some heavy hitting names. We're not talking about, Vandy anymore. I'm sorry to Trey's era of the people that we were committing. We were trying to get to commit. And Trey, remember, was seriously considering Vanderbilt at the time before he committed to us. But we're in a whole different ball game. Amari Winston, 6 foot 1.5 inches, 254-pound tight end from Calhoun, Georgia. The only one from Georgia on this list. 4-star, number 90 tight end, and number 211 national. Again, another top 250 player. He had 39 offers. Texas, Auburn, Bama, Arkansas, Cincy, Colorado, Florida, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Louisville, Miami, Michigan State, Mizzou, NC State, UNC, Ohio State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas Tech, USC, Utah, Virginia Tech, and Wisconsin. And I'm not including those schools that I don't consider are recruiting on our level right now, just so you know. So obviously there's more 39. And yes, I am leaving some Power 4 schools off of those lists because, quite frankly, they don't speak to the quality of the player that we're talking about. These are just some, hey, we're going to send it out there because we kind of have to. But those folks, when you start talking LSU, Bama, Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Texas Tech, Utah, Wisconsin, those are big, big, big players. So number 12 tight end nationally and 90, right, up for his player rating. Charles Warden, last one on this list. And again, there were more folks on campus, but I wanted to focus on these guys because they are heavy hitters. Wade and Charles, 6'2", 185-pound wide receiver, trying to get some more wide receiver help from Palm Beach Central. 4-star, 4-star rated a 90. He's the 13th ranked athlete and the 34th ranked player in the state of Florida. 32 offers: Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, FSU, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, LSU, Miami, Michigan, NC State, Penn State, Tennessee, A&M, and West Virginia. So those are the guys that I want to focus on this week. Every single one of these guys are expected to be impact players. And if what I'm hearing is correct, that we got 2 to 3 flips, 2 to 3 of those guys may be UCF Knights coming this fall. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? What are you guys' thoughts on recruiting in general? I mean, it feels like we've got the Miami part of winning the offseason correct. We'll see about what the season holds for us, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But I cannot say this strongly enough. These are some heavy hitters.
Yeah, I think being in the running for top 10 nationally ranked players at certain positions is just is something that I certainly don't want to ever get used to. But I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, we wouldn't have thought that was even really possible. We'd be just being on the same list as some of these bigger schools that you were just mentioning, or at least I should say more traditionally powerhouse schools than UCF on the recruiting trail nationally. But Gus Malzahn and his staff, the Big 12, conference, the trajectory that our program is going on, all of that is kind of coming to fruition in these big name recruits considering UCF to be their home out of high school. I mean, we've talked about some of the success we've had and some of the high rankings nationally we've had for as far as transfer portal goes. And that's going to be no different this upcoming season and this off season that we've already, started already. But I'm excited to see some top defensive linemen, some top linebackers on this list, and hopefully they wind up choosing UCF because, especially when it comes to a position like linebacker, which we continually focus on in each offseason over the last few years, that's one that going into this upcoming season seems to be very heavy with upperclassmen, fifth-year guys, transfers that are just coming in here for 1 year. And so we definitely need to be able to backfill that with some of the talent that we've gotten out of high school already that may be, ready to play a little bit this upcoming season, but certainly continually filling that pipeline and filling certain gaps with young talent as well that we can hopefully develop, and we'll actually see that success in a UCF uniform. So I'm excited to see some of the recruits that we're in the running for and some of the ones that we've gotten already.
Yeah, I think the important part to say about all this too, and just to kind of put this in perspective for people, we save this weekend in our recruiting, like Gus and the team saves this for the people that they're making the hardest runs at, and that we have a likelihood to close, right? So understand that if there was no real interest and if this was just a flyer, them taking a flyer and a free trip, I mean, the one guy only took three total visits, right? These guys are all serious about UCF, and we are in the running even if we don't flip them. So to your point about the transfer portal as well, that helps there too. Josh, what do you think? I mean, you've been here. You're the grandpa of the group, so. Well, hold on. Is it you or Ben? Is it you or Ben that's the grandpa? Who's older?
No, I think I'm older than both of you, but like by a year or two. Come on.
And don't act like you're somehow younger than me, Roger. Get out of here. You quit deflecting.
Hey, I'm younger than Josh, and that's all that matters. And I'm almost younger than you, Ben. You're only what? I think 3 years older than me, or 4 years older.
I turned 40 in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, two or three weeks.
Yeah. So I'm only 3 years older than you. I just got more gray hair.
Yeah. That's fair. The Ben was still playing when I was getting into grad school. I think so. We're within that same time frame.
Bought that window.
So
he was still playing when I was getting my bachelor degree. So I think I there you go. I mean, I win.
All right, we've established our ages. Let's see what you think about the recruiting.
Old offense.
It should be the Knighted Old Ones. Old offense.
Tonight. It's the old.
Back in my day, we only had 2 stars, and we were thankful. This is that's kind of part of it, right? Like back in my day, we were grateful to have like a couple of 3 stars, and we didn't care about stars because we were going diamonds in the rough, right? And we got these students that were molded and crafted to eventually get to the NFL, because honestly, we put a good amount of people in the NFL for where we were in our history. So I agree with Ben. I absolutely love that. Athletes, we're getting, I don't know if we're getting past student athletes yet, but we're going to get close enough. Fellow future co-workers of mine, how about that? Will I'm glad we have people of this level of interest. We when we were back in like later O'Leary times, we're talking in the 2010s, we're getting towards the Bortles and doing bigger things and getting on the map. We would have some good recruits, but we'd have a 4-star maybe every so often, and we're happy to have that. And
we did not get 4 stars, like legit 4 stars, with the exception of a certain somebody that was from Gainesville, Florida, certain quarterback. Come on, Dante would have been a
from
4.
Gainesville,
Huh?
He wasn't
from that
Gainesville.
area.
He's from, okay, we'll call that area, but he wasn't from Gainesville.
Okay.
No, we didn't get anyone. Like we had some great players, but no, we didn't
He
have.
would have been a 5-star
Oh,
had he been in a rated
100%.
era, but he wasn't rated.
He was from Vanguard. I know because my friend played defense against him, and Dante broke his hand in a football game, and he was playing defense.
Did he try to intercept a pass from Dante, and that's how he broke his hand?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
he was playing defense, and Dante broke his hand when he tipped the ball at like 17.
That's a legendary thing right there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he was. When we have for those of you who don't remember UCF back at that time frame in the late 90s, when you see recruits that look like they're already grown men, that was Dante when he was 17 and 18. You're like, that doesn't, you are a very large, muscular human being. He was huge.
Anyway, be very careful with where you're going with that, because I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it. Oh my gosh.
This is not war chant. So anyway, we have this great group of young men who are really interested in playing football in the atmosphere that we all have created, from donors to former students, current students like Noah, to alumni, to the athletic association, to the Kingdom Nil. This is what we've all built from administration. We've all built this together, right? And we've created an environment where these young men are interested in joining. So that is really what I'm excited about all of this. And I don't want to rest on the laurels of what we already have. I'm hoping it'll happen year after year, and we keep working together as this UCF family to do it. So I'm excited to see what happens, but I don't want to be like Miami and off-season champions and not winning a darn thing for 20 plus years. We got to change that part of the narrative.
That was something we were going to talk about a little later. One thing I do want to say too, I do think that this recruiting staff that Gus has put together, and Gus himself, if we inserted another coach into where UCF is today, I don't feel like we'd be recruiting on this level. I don't think we would be here yet, right? It would take a lot longer for us to climb the proverbial ladder even within the power conferences. So yeah, we have the Big 12 logo, which we needed. But kind of like what we talked about last week, we've built the infrastructure to play the recruiting game like an Alabama does, or like an Auburn did, or a lot of these other larger schools. So we've got that brain drain has been dumped into our recruiting game, and it's certainly been moved up. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't think if Gus Malzahn had not been here, I don't think we would be here yet as from a recruiting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Not only, I mean, obviously because of where we were at when, that second year of Heupel, like where it just seemed like, man, who are we actually going to bring in here? And then certainly I think Gus has done such a good job of what you just described, building his staff and kind of around him. And somehow, while he's an older coach, like he's been around for a long time, he seems anyways of like figuring out so many ways to like stay relevant with the high school recruits and like, current and certainly seems to be able to relate to them very well. Along with, of course, and more, maybe even more importantly, his position coaches and the recruiting staff that he has put together. But also, I think what Gus Malzahn does so well, in particular as the head coach at UCF, is he sells the kind of future of college football mantra really well, and I think that he sells that message and that mantra really well because he truly believes it. I mean, I think that was he's talked about since his first press conference of like the reasons why he was excited to accept the job and excited to be here, and I think that he works every day to like make sure that mantra is reality. Like the future of college athletics, the future of college football is here. And so that part of it, I think he does a really good job of. And so that's what we're seeing, with all the nationally, ranked recruits that we're getting and the national rankings that we're receiving with our recruiting. I think
it's a shoe game, bro. It's a shoe game. And the fact that like Christy Malzahn puts a poll out there and says which one should he wear, like to the fan base, that level of engagement is kind of what we were getting with Danny White, right?
Yeah.
And with him leaving and then TMO coming in. I think Terry Mohajir has made a concerted effort to let Gus be the brand for UCF football. Now, if Gus were to leave at some point, let's say that Arkansas job opens back up, and I'm not speaking it to existence, but let's say he decides to leave, what happens then, right? So I think from an infrastructure and recruiting infrastructure perspective, I think he's built something evergreen there. I think that if he were to leave, I think that stays. But the brand of UCF football, that will be interesting. And to your point, too, one of the advantages I do think he does have is that he came up in the high school ranks. And he was a very successful high school football coach for a while. So he knows, a lot of what these kids are interested in. And when NIL came out, he was one of the first coaches, unlike someone like OSU's head coach, who dove straight in. I mean, selling player shirts, like wearing them to press conferences. You remember the Bowser shirts and all that other stuff. I think that's important. And the one thing you always hear is that it feels like family, and it's not cliche, right? Feels like family, and that he was a real dude, as like Gus Malzahn likes to say. He's a real dude. Like everybody feels like they don't pressure them, they don't try to snake oil them. They tell them which is a lot like George O'Leary did back in the day. That was a lot of the same comments of his staff. Is hey, this is what you're going to run into. In George O'Leary's time, it was, we only want you to recruit once you're 100% ready. We don't want you to go on other, other visits. But here, Gus Malzahn is saying, and his staff is saying, hey, look, we care about you. Go do your thing. We know you're going to go do your thing. And that pays dividends in the transfer portal. But more importantly, people start to catch on and they understand, hey, look, either you've either got my best interest at heart or you don't. And I think that's what connects so well. And that's where you get those family comments from, is because it's not about the recruits and their families leave feeling that it's about them and not necessarily about UCF. And regardless of what their decision is, they're still going to back them. And then, they did a really good job of that at Auburn. Christy was really involved with the recruits back in Auburn, and she's kind of reprised her role, although she's taken a step back since her illness, in helping to do that and build that family type culture. And the guys that are there, the recruiters that he's brought in, they do a really good job of that as well. Josh, did you have anything else before we move to the next topic?
Moving on up to the next topic.
I wanted to comment on the Arkansas thing just real quick, and only to say that I feel like now more than ever, Gus has done a good job of setting the foundation and building the brand of UCF, and everything that Josh mentioned as far as, and you, Roger, as far as building the brand of UCF, like we've all contributed to that, right? Like, and the atmosphere and everything. But I just feel like if that were to happen, Gus were to leave the program for any reason, I feel like now at this point, UCF becomes a really, really hot job in college football. I mean, I mean, obviously we can't quite yet. Maybe a few years from now, we can't quite compete on the coach's salary like to the nth degree, like a Texas or Oregon or whatever can compete on it. But by the same token, I feel like just the recruiting, grounds that you're in the middle of here, and then just everything else around the program, it just seems like if that were to happen, the UCF head football coach job would be one of the most sought after jobs, and almost like, like what we even saw with the Alabama job opening up. Like it was almost like people were a little hesitant to kind of take that mantle, and I don't think that we'd see that here. We'd see somebody so eager to continue to build this program, and that would be. While I don't want that to happen anytime soon, because I do believe in what Gus Malzahn is building here, I just think it would be an exciting time when it does come time for him to ride off into the sunset.
Yeah,
well, I was just going to say real quick, Josh, and then you can go. Like, I feel like Bama, and this is why I'm not so sure about Bama right now.
Right.
Bama's experiencing what we did after Frost left. And Heupel, by all accounts, when he was here, it was all of us, I think, here at the time at UCF. One, they were big shoes to fill. Two, he was a little hamstrung and there's a lot of pressure. But three, from a recruiting perspective and from a performance perspective, there was a letdown. And I think Bama fans are going to be in for a letdown. So it'll be interesting to see how long Nick Saban's successor lasts. All right, Josh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know it was a kind of the mix of GOL and, well, really more mix of some O'Leary and some of Frost recruits too. But I mean, Heupel did go undefeated in his first, not postseason. But I will say this: I think that Gus Malzahn will probably be here next year. At some point, he's going to do one of two things. He's going to retire, or he's going to go back home, right? Probably not Central Arkansas, but he will probably go back home. So it's probably going to happen. Now, when? Who knows? But he's not going out on 6 and 7. And forget the fact that all that other stuff. I mean, I think we need to prepare ourselves for the eventuality of it, just like any business owner should be prepared for an employee leaving, and you and your family should be, job changes, all those type of things. You should be prepared for those things happening in your personal life. And when you're talking about your sports life, these things are going to happen. Dawkins is at one point not going to be the coach, but not yet. Right. I really hope Coach Wallace sticks around for a long, long time. But who knows? So I feel like Gus definitely is a big piece of this whole puzzle we've built, and we can survive him not being our coach, but we might still have that possible letdown depending on what coach comes in. Anyway, so that we'll get back to other stuff, but
all right.
I don't think there's a lot of people who think this is Gus's last year here at UCF, and he's going to Arkansas hell or high water, no matter how good or bad they do next year. And I'm not on that bandwagon yet.
All right. So after Josh's one more thing, let's go ahead and pivot. All right. So, next question on the docket before we talk a little bit about Big 12. A lot of the preseason pundits are now coming out with their predictions. That's a lot of P's in one sentence for UCF and where we'll be. So, most of them are settling right around like 6th through 8th in the conference. And remember, our conference grows again this year with the PAC schools. So it'll be not 14 schools, but 16 schools. So that's six we were thinking, or seven we're thinking, wow, that's kind of middle of the road, middle of the pack, but it's actually slightly above. Everybody is saying they don't know what to expect from the Big 12 this year, and I think that's 100% accurate. And most of the pundits and a lot of the folks have us ranked in the 40s this year, which I think comes to a surprise, or as a surprise to most UCF fans. Because, we said earlier on in one of our previous shows, where do you expect? And, of course, me being the black and gold branded till I died in the wool UCF fan, I expect us to go undefeated. Do I really expect us to go undefeated? I don't know. We'll tackle this schedule again as we get a little closer to the season, but I feel a lot better than where I did before. I also feel like a lot of people don't understand the type of talent that we brought in. Most of them are saying we're the dark horse candidate. On3 just had a podcast recently that was talking about us as a dark horse candidate. What do you guys think? Do you think being ranked in the 40s is fair? Do you see us as a dark horse candidate?
I think it's possible. I think it depends on how everything comes together, right? We have the quarterback that is in the absolute mold of what Gus Malzahn wants, and that is the engine that he needs in his offense, right? Again, JRP, love him, seems to be doing great in Pittsburgh right now, and probably will get on a practice squad. And he was a good player when he was on the field. If JRP is on the field every single game, we're not 6-7 last season. And what else has Gus really had?
I wouldn't even say that. I would say a healthy JRP. We would have seen a lot more out of this off. But last year, we put up yards. We were number 8 in yards last year. Yeah. But what we didn't do is score. We went in,
horrible in the red zone.
Yeah, we were 42 points per game under Heupel and under Frost, right? 38 to 42, depending on which year we were talking about. But this year, and I think the concern offensively is, can we finish in the red zone? What do you think?
Well, you can finish, as unlike what most people think UCF stands for. And that's why I say it depends on how this all shapes out. KJ is the prototypical quarterback that should be able to run over people, right? You then have what, we're 3-ish deep on running backs that should be able to be both that scat back shifty type of player and bowl you over. And I was gonna say Jonathan Davis, but that's some people might remember Jonathan Davis in the audience, I'm just gonna run the heck over you type of player. We have,
there's a much better example of that in UCF
too, but still,
go farther back.
Well, there's a few, there's a bunch.
Kevin Smith.
Yeah, he was a little bit of both. He would lower a shoulder, but I think Jonathan Davis felt like a bowling ball when he was out there, and in a really good way. So run it back, no pun intended. We have these pieces. We're 3 deep on wide receivers, and maybe someone will merge as 4, right? And Burdell is one of them. So we have all of these pieces, and if they merge together and the line holds well, we have a lot, and I know it is. So, but that's why people are saying this. They see what happened last year. They see what's coming in. They know generally how Gus Malzahn offenses work, and they're trying to connect the dots for us. That's what I feel. Now, what happens is a whole nother story. But it seems like we have all the pieces together. It's how they mold, and if people, important people, stay healthy.
I think that Brown helps us with the quarterback situation. I think my biggest concern, honestly, is not even that. I think the reason why we are ranked where we are is because we didn't score enough points. We only averaged 28 points per game, I believe, last year, or somewhere close to that, right? And I think offensively, why we are where we are is because of that. And, we've got to your point, we've got two 1,400-yard rushers plus Miles Montgomery. And not to mention the kids that we, recruited that were high-level 4-stars in the running back room in the last year and the year before that haven't seen any playing time yet. So there's a lot there. Ben, it looks like you want to say something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think one of the reasons, it could be scoring, the scoring woes, I guess we've had where we couldn't quite, finish drives and compete in the red zone like we wanted to and like we have in the past. Also, obviously, we've had, we haven't been able to stop the run very well last year. That certainly, and so when you look at this season's roster, as far as some of the deficiencies we had last year, you kind of look at it like, did they improve upon those things? And I think the answer is yes on finishing in the red zone and being able to, improve in our own run game offensively. But I think talent-wise, the linebacker position, we've done really well with the transfer portal there. And I think people should be excited and recognize some of the talent that we've brought in at that position in particularly. But just as Josh said, how are they going to gel together, and are we going to have the right scheme? Are we going to have the right discipline in order to stop the run next season in the Big 12? And then just on top of that, I think that's just in general, right? Like I think one of the reasons why. I think those are the reasons, like as you talked about, Roger, is like those are the reasons why we're like ranked where we're at. Like people don't quite know about us, but I think people are recognizing the amount of talent that we retained on our roster and the amount of talent that we brought in. And it's where they're very comfortable with calling us a dark horse candidate because they're like, wow, I mean, this is an extremely talented roster on paper. And so it's very, it's kind of simple and easy to call us a dark horse candidate because, if we perform to our talent level, then those who kind of predicted us as having an outside chance of winning the conference kind of look smart in that situation. But it's hedging their bets, calling us a dark horse candidate because if we don't quite live up to that expectation from a talent perspective and it doesn't quite come together the way that we expect it to as UCF fans, I think it's that's kind of hedging their bets on saying, well, luckily for us and our predictions, Utah and Kansas State were as good and consistent as we thought they were going to be as well. So there you have it. Now, the other thing that's exciting about, I think, the way that we're viewed nationally and within the conference, though, is that we're certainly not like a Cincinnati where like just no one's talking about it. Like no one's talking about certain teams in our conference. They're just getting lost in the mix.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, and I'll take a couple of things that you pulled out of there, right? So for one, the dark horse conversation, I think we are a popular dark horse pick for a couple of reasons. Anybody in the Big 12, if you're talking about a 16-team league, right? Anybody in that top 6, 7, 8 really has a shot at being in the championship game, let alone winning it, right? So I think everybody agrees that we should or could be the dark horse candidate that comes in and wins because we have a legitimate shot at doing that. With the transfer portal, just like high school, remember, about 30% of the players that come in will be starters for you, right? So again, we all get excited because these are all 4-star guys that are coming in, or you've got like Ryan Davis who comes in from Georgia and all of that stuff, and that name brand's there, right? But we've got to temper that a little bit because only about 30% of them will play meaningful minutes. So that I think is key. The other thing that you mentioned that we were talking about was scheme, right? And I think Josh said this about scheme. So that opens up the door to the question of the Ted Roof effect, right? So One of the things that the On3 podcast that was talking about us said, one of the co-hosts there really didn't like Ted Roof. Because he's kind of been a journeyman, right? He's been at UCF before, although briefly he was at UCF before. He was, though. He was hired by UCF. He was on staff. Now the thing about it is, he comes to us from Oklahoma, but he's kind of been the guy that head coaches call to clean up defenses. And what I mean by that is he's been the guy that they've called in to clean up the fundamentals. So, for example, he's well known for tackling. Nakai Martinez, who's not with the team this year, had one of the highest missed tackle rates in the entire country, right? So Ted Roof has been brought in specifically to clean up the fundamentals. He's also, and we've alluded to it here, we're going to see a different defense this year, and it will also not be as plain vanilla, right? So this guy does know football, and he's been hired by a lot of people. And even Oklahoma last year had a better defense than what they had before he came in, came through the door. How long he sticks around, that's the question, right? Because he has a tendency after a couple of years, he's off to maybe greener pastures, but I don't know if it's always greener pastures. But at the end of the day, he came in for immediate effect, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before last week. Is Gus Malzahn's pissed off, and he's coming in to bring somebody in for immediate help to help clean up some of those fundamentals. So I kind of think that's where Ted Roof comes into play here, and there's a lot of questions as to how good this defense can be, but I do think it'll be upgraded. And then the other thing is KJ Jefferson didn't have a great year last year, and that's crazy saying that because he's still the all-time leader in most offensive categories for Arkansas. But he didn't have a team around him that would enable him to play, stay healthy, and play his game. Now, I saw some video of him recently, and he looks a lot better than he did in the offseason. And the other thing, you mentioned Burdell Richardson. He's been putting out some YouTube video, if you want to check that out, about his experiences. And from what everybody says, he's the Shaquem Griffin type who's in practicing at 2 a.m., in the field house by himself. So he really wants playing time, and I think he's going to get it.
That is great to hear about Burdell Richardson. That's the first time I've heard that. And, obviously when you compare some sort of leadership style or leadership trait in a young man like that to Shaquem Griffin, that's fantastic to hear. And then, and I know that this, Roger, just because I know you've done some research when KJ Jefferson decided to come over here with UCF, but I haven't. And so would you say, though, this UCF offense is an upgrade in talent around him than KJ Jefferson was experiencing at Arkansas as recent as last season? Maybe he's had some previous seasons where there's a lot of talent around him, but what about last season?
Yeah, wide receiver talent. He had one really, really good wide receiver there. But the big thing that failed him last season was the line. Their line just performed terribly. And we do have Coach Hand, and I have a lot of faith in Coach Hand. We've got 3 of our linemen that played and started last year that will be and continue to start on the line for us this year. We've brought some pretty good players in this year as well on the line, and I have faith that Coach Hand is a better offensive line coach than the coach at Arkansas, and it really showed when they played last year. So I think that's the key to him is he had a pretty good running back and he had one really, really good wide receiver. Everybody else was just mediocre.
Yeah. And he's got a committee of running backs to kind of back him up and help protect him there. And then along with, you mentioned Ja'Cory Brown, but this season, I think that if we can keep KJ healthy and upright and running this offense, we might have a chance to see something really special here. So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, KJ Jefferson is not JRP. Yes, he's a running quarterback, He has a really, really good deep ball, which JRP's got better over time. But he's not going to be that. We're not running this quasi triple offense with him. I don't know why I can't remember the name of it.
Triple option.
Triple option. That's what I was going to say. Quasi triple option offense with him. He's going to be a guy who climbs the ladder. He's going to be a guy they're going to use, traditional power style running backs. That's why we have two 1,400-yard running backs. There's going to be a lot of that. He's only going to take off when the pocket breaks down. And, you won't see him take as many snaps as what JRP did running the ball. That was a different style of offense than what we had before. He's more of a traditional quarterback who can run.
Right.
So that's
quarterback.
right. And that's what I expect to see. I mean, think about Greg Ward at Houston. Do you remember when he back in 2013 or 14, whenever it was, he was really hot coming out of Houston at that time and was in Heisman contention because he was more that JRP style quarterback, but had a better arm than what JRP did. And so I know we think running quarterback, we think Gus Malzahn, we know what we're going to see, but he's going to be more Cam Newton than he is going to be JRP. So this offense will look different. You'll have more traditional sets for the running backs. You're going to have more power running game. I think, Gus Malzahn said this last year that there was a huge difference in what they expected versus what they got out of Big 12 teams. Less air raid, more power teams, and I think he leaned heavily on that. So let me ask you this. If we trip up, and this is kind of alluding to what we were talking about earlier, if we trip up this season, right? So we have high expectations. Everybody's expecting at least an 8-win team, okay? Which last year we had an 8-win team.
Right.
At least we probably had a 9-win team potentially, right? If we wouldn't have dropped those really, really close games at the last part of the season. A lot of that is, injuries. People don't realize how badly JRP was hurt. RJ Harvey was hurt for a lot of last season. And he was out of gas towards the end of last season. Defensively, we were hurt and we just didn't have a lot of depth. The line was hurt. So I think we're in a better position there. But if we trip up this season, we've been talking about, becoming Miami and winning the off seasons and not being able to get into the conference. Do we run the risk of being that winning the offense or winning the off season type team, or are we different?
I think that in order to avoid that conversation, you've got to put the results on the field. You got to match it up with kind of the excitement that is built in the offseason with the rankings and the recruiting rankings. I think you have to at least put up, as you said, we're an 8 or 9 win team last season, wound up being a losing record for the first time in Gus Malzahn's career. And so I just think that you can't string together multiple losing seasons and where the only excitement is in the off season, because then you run the risk of being
Miami,
that green and orange team down south. Yeah. Honestly, you run the risk of being Miami. You run the risk of talking about recruiting rankings, and then you realize that you're only doing your talking between the months of February through June, as opposed to doing your talking in the months of November, December, and January. So, I think you run the risk of that if you don't have the results on the field. You don't see these athletes come together. You don't see these athletes stay. I think there's some. I think our expectations have changed so quickly on athletes actually staying, but you always want to have the talent within your program, and then you need that talent to perform. So yeah, it's you have to match up the off season. It has to be a complete year, basically. And we were just talking about months of the year to get excited about it. It's got to be the entire time. So yeah, I think that we do run that risk if we don't complete the success of going all in the way that Gus has appeared to go in on this season.
Yeah, I concur. I will say that we have a little bit of time, but I don't think we have a lot of time. If this year ends up being a 7-6 year, I think a lot of people are going to be upset from top down.
Oh yeah,
right, but we
season.
don't have, like, if you're talking about the only thing's talking, right? The reality is, yeah, that's true. I get it now. This is why you have to be on YouTube at times. Okay, so here's the deal. I know we're referencing Miami, but see, Miami has been the off-season champions since the 80s, when they actually were on field champions, and we have time to be off-season champions for a while. But I just feel like this is really, we've already pushed all the chips in. We have ace king suited maybe, and we feel that's all right. That's a good enough hand. We could hold up against pocket jacks. I feel like that's the type of space we're in right now. So do I think that we are winning the off season too much and not on the field? I don't think we have enough time to really determine that yet. But in all fairness, it's going to be a really long off season if we're not getting to like 9 and 10 wins. I feel, which this is not what our expectations were when I was going to school. So I can say it now because we're doing the podcast and we have high expectations for ourselves. That's great. Yes. So I feel like we have more time to be off-season champs, but I'd love us not to have that, even think about that moniker. How about that?
All right. I don't want to be the off-season champs. That's not UCF's brand. We are just simply the champs. Just like we are the UCF Knights, not the Golden Knights. We are the champs, right? So that's where I think we should be shooting for. All right, so let's go ahead and pivot again. So pivot. All right, there it is. The Big 12 this week said that they are in negotiations with Allstate, the Good Hands insurance people. Allstate, please give us a little extra there on the side too. We'll go ahead and become the All-State Knighted Ones if you want us to.
The All-Knighted Ones.
We are for sale.
We are for sale, exactly. Apparently the Big 12 is for sale as well. It looks like the Big 12 may be changing their logo, their name, and everything to the All-State 12 or something, some variation of that. How do you guys feel about that, especially in lieu of the fact that, and here's an angle on this that I want you to think about. When we joined the Big East, right, the Big East sold the Big East naming rights to the Big East. I know that sounds crazy, but the AAC, which was the original Big East, sold it to the basketball schools, sold the name, and then all of a sudden that brand equity of the AAC was not as good, and it had to be rebuilt to be the best G5 league, right? So I think there's some danger if we I don't like it for UCF if we move away from the Big 12. I think the Big 12 name needs to still be involved in the conference's name. If they just change it to the All-State 12 or something like that, I'm not going to be happy at all. And it's kind of crazy that this is our second year in and now we're having this discussion, just like the Big East, right? So I just feel like the brand equity around the Big 12 name, it needs to kind of stay. It needs to be incorporated into whatever a affiliate partnership would look like with Allstate. What do you guys think?
I agree wholeheartedly. I joked in our text chat, just like the big All-State conference. I mean, are you kidding me with this? Like, this is insane.
Well, I mean, the All-State kind of works because we've got a lot of states involved from all over, right?
No, I get that. It's just I agree with you. Well, we've talked about it in previous shows. We've talked about it amongst ourselves, just how like the names of these the names of the conferences don't matter anymore when you've got California schools joining the ACC or, things like that, because it's called the Atlantic Coast Conference and all of a sudden you've got West Coast schools, considering joining them. So like there's
Considering they joined.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Stanford and
exactly.
UCF.
That's what I'm saying. Like Stanford is, in the Atlantic Coast Conference. There literally couldn't be further from the Atlantic Coast they possibly could be. So, so it makes it kind of, as we said, like it makes it kind of silly to have the names of these conferences because of the schools that are within them. That being said, the reason why that is the case is because, as you just said, I mean, it's a brand name. It's a brand name that people associate with college football. And I understand that everything is for sale right now in collegiate athletics, but it's like to change the name. I think it hurts the schools within that conference, and to change it far away from now. If you want to do some sort of hybrid, like the All-State Big 12 Conference or something like that, I mean, I think I'm more for that than injecting or literally changing the name to a brand name like that, the naming rights to it, because everybody's used to that with stadiums and used to that with arenas and basketball.
I could see a lot of All-State commercials that are played nationally highlighting the Big 12. So I could see that being a net positive for us. So, for example, if you're watching an SEC game or an SEC championship game, there's a lot of All-State commercials out there.
Right.
If they co-brand with the Big 12, I could see that being an advantage. But I agree with you that I wouldn't want the Big 12 to go away as part of the name.
And I'm sure if you're All-State, you want like the name to be completely changed. But I hope that where they land on these types of talks, I hope that where they land is the All-State Big 12 Conference or Big 12 Conference brought to you by All-State, whatever it may be, but like having All-State even being the top but it's still remaining as Big 12, I think that would be,
Nobra did chime in. Nobra did chime in, and he did say that it was the All 12 Conference. Sounds kind of cool. I don't know, because that almost reinforces the all 12-year-olds sit at the Thanksgiving kiddies table in the Big Three, and I don't want to have any opportunity there.
At that point, what's in the number? Like I don't know. Like if Big 12,
well, it's a brand. It's a brand. It's not the number anymore. I mean,
then you're just deciding which is more important to the brand, the word big or the word 12. Like it's the history that's associated with that brand and all of those historic, Red River rivalries and all. The Big Eight, though. And they used to be the Big Eight. So which number or which word is
the Big 12 has been around long enough that it's established its own brand. Think about the Big 10 as another perfect example. The Big 10 doesn't have 10 in their conference, but their brand means something. You associate Ohio State, you associate Michigan, you associate certain rivalries with that. And I think the Big 12 is the same, even though with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, I think you still have, Oklahoma State and Texas Tech and even Baylor at this point. Because remember, Baylor wasn't in. They got left out of the Big 12 when they merged. Houston got left out of the Big 8 when there was a merger, right? TCU joined later. But now you think about Texas-centric schools, and I think that is where it's changing. But the Big 12 in itself is a football brand based on the success that it's had in the past, even if the schools aren't the same.
Well, I'll say to Nobra that all 12 will never happen because that's not the brand name of the company. The company's not called All. It's called All-State. Like I say the one thing that they will not compromise is paying billions of dollars to cut their name in half. Like that's not happening. So like it's not going to be the All 12 Conference, as cool as that sounds. It would be the All-State Big 12 Conference or the All-State Conference or the All-State 12 Conference. Like, it's going to be a complete babe.
Yeah.
Just put B in front of all and just put like the Big Baller Conference or something. I don't know. We could do that.
I don't think the Ball family has that money, or at least the elder has that money. I disagree with all of you. And when you're talking old off,
all right, hold on.
That is an old man.
All right, so we lost Josh there. I think he had some technical difficulties.
Yeah, here's the old off. Old off is like you still think we're talking about, what used to happen years ago and people caring about this stuff. I'm going to quote the famous Rod Tidwell: "Show me the money. Show me the money. Show me the money. We need money." And
but I think I agree with you, but I think that there's some things that you just don't give up on. I think there's too much cachet.
Show me the money.
Bro, Wolf of Wall Street, bro. Just if you want to bring in that kind of stuff, bring in the Wolf of Wall Street, right? There are certain things you just don't give up. So,
I feel like there's a compromise here. And if it's the All-State 12, it's the All-State 12. I actually do like the All-State with the Big 12 logo. I've seen
I think it would look awesome.
That I like. And I think that's a good question. Is the brand the name Big 12 or the XII swirl? Like when we joined the Big 12, did we put big up there? No, we did the 12 with the XII in the stands in the basketball arenas. I agree with you. I bet for $20 million a school, the SEC would become the something else. 100 for enough money.
I don't think the SEC would. They already have less. They're already making less money than what the Big Ten is, and they are, and I mean not just overall, but per school, they're already making less than that. And that's because they did not want to bow to certain demands that the media companies were giving them. So I don't think so. I don't think the SEC, that the SEC is the SEC. There's a reason they chant SEC. It matters more, all that stuff. They've got jorts with SEC patches on it. It's just the SEC is what it is. It's its own brand. I think the Big 12 has become that as well. And now with this dissipation, with the Pac-12 going away, the ACC being, they're swaying. They're waiting for the knockout punch with what FSU is doing and Clemson's doing and everybody. And I think UNC and UVA as well. I think that I see this as a struggle right now to remain the Power Three, both in revenue dollars, but also in brand identity. I think we want to be the third conference. I think that's what your mark is angling for. And part of that is revenue, but part of that is not losing that brand equity. So from a marketing perspective, having a marketing company, having run a marketing company, among many other things, technology companies and all of that too, you do not want to lose the brand equity that you have built up in the Big 12 conference. You just don't, because it means that right now the Big 12 is seen. They were seen above the Pac-12, and that's why you saw the hatefulness by the Pac-12. And so having survived Texas OU leaving when the Pac-12 wanted, everybody was like, oh, the Big 12 is going to die twice. They've survived it twice. They are seen as the contraction winners, if that makes any sense. Right now, we are seen as the SEC and Big 10, the Big 12, and then the ACC. If that goes away, you take away that advantage from a brand equity perspective. Just my opinion on it as a marketer or owning a marketing company.
I agree with where you're going. Show me the money. I still think that we are, you want to hold brand that's good. I'd rather have 40 million more in the bank to get.
Yeah, but
I think
to Allstate, is it more to Allstate? Let's look at it from Allstate's perspective. Is it more valuable to have the Big 12 presented by Allstate versus just the Allstate conference? I think in college football,
it's 100% more valuable to Allstate, in my opinion, to have it be the Allstate 12, because what's going to happen on ESPN and SportsCenter when they're talking about the conference, if it's the All-State Big 12 conference, everyone in the media is just going to shorten it to the Big 12. They're going to just continue to call it the Big 12. All-State is going to be dropped off of that if they are just a latch on to it. So I think if you're All-State's if you're that company and you're going to pay a whole lot of money, I think one of your bigger sticking points is that you do need to insert your name into the actual, changing the name of the conference to that, as opposed to adding on to the conference. I think from a UCF and Big 12 member and a Big 12 fan and all of those perspectives, what we would like is just the latch on, because as Josh said, we want the money, but we also don't want to all of a sudden be in this kind of corporate conference as opposed to a.
Well, we can talk when we pivot. We'll talk about that. Yeah, exactly.
Why don't we just pivot to that, because we are becoming that to make up the difference.
I always felt like the American was kind of a corporate conference in the sense that we just kind of we're just trying to grasp at every straw we could get.
I feel like the American was it was less about being a corporate conference, I think. And that's why I say I didn't agree with giving up the Big East name either, because the Big East had brand equity, whether it be from the 80s basketball to the 90s basketball, all that airtime that ESPN had put into it, people knowing the name and where they go to. And then you go to the AAC and nobody ever knew who was in the AAC. I guarantee you, if you said the Big East, people would have known who was in the Big East. So I'm sorry. I have to disagree with both of you on this. I think it's actually more worthwhile. One, from a contractual basis, I don't know, these media partners bought a brand. They didn't just buy a group of schools, but there's brand equity in that Big 12 name as well for the media partners, being Fox and ESPN. I don't know if they would allow that to happen. Two, I just feel like All-State loses. Right now, the Big 12 brand has equity. If you eliminate the Big 12 brand and just name it the All-State, whatever football school conference, I think you give away that brand equity. I think co-branding is more valuable to All-State than just naming a conference. That's just my opinion on it. So, all right, Josh is focused on something, so I'm just going to go ahead and pivot. Speaking about, there you go. Speaking about a corporate conference and truly being open for business, as Brett Yormark has said, the Big 12, big news this week. Also, private equity is now becoming involved. We've heard about it with FSU, and everybody scoffed and made fun of FSU about possibly leaving, using private equity to move out of the conference that they're in and do the buyout for the grant of rights. And that's a whole nother conversation that we're not going to go down because we're talking about the Big 12 right now. The Big 12 has officially is exploring getting PE or private equity funds into the Big 12. So what does that mean for those that aren't familiar with PE? Well, PE is usually when someone gives you money and invests in you for a percentage stake ownership of the company, and that gives you the right to an equivalent percentage of the dividends that come from that company. So what's being talked about right now? Well, the Big 12 conference is considering 20% of the conference, so giving up 20% ownership of the conference for $1 billion. Okay, so that means that they would get 20% of conference dividends and value for $1 billion. Now, in business world, the challenge with PE is that they usually, when they become involved, they like to throw their weight around, right? Their goal is to own as much of your company as they can, so they'll get you. I know this, I don't mean for this football show to become a business lesson, but this is important because it impacts UCF. What their goal is to give you money, right? encourage you to grow, make you go back to them for more money, and take more and more ownership until they take control of it. Usually at that point, they're trying to buy it for either the sales that you have or for the contracts that you have or whatever, and they want to return within 5 years. So the Big 12, this is a slippery slope, right? But they're offering 20% of the conference for $1 billion. From the GOR perspective, first question that comes to mind for me is one of the reasons Utah signed was because we had a shorter grant of rights. They did not sign the 99-year pledge that UCF did that said, I'm going to be part of the Big 12 conference for 99 years. They did not sign that, right? And they have been very boisterous about saying, hey, look, we are where we are right now, but we definitely don't want to close the door for anything else. So how does this impact Utah? Because if I'm the CDC, which is the name of the company, I do not want, if I'm going to give you a portion of that $1 billion, I don't want you leaving. I need to be able to recoup my investment. And that means those current brands of schools need to be in the conference. And that's going to be longer than 5 years in this kind of deal. So right now, the grant of rights runs through 2031 for Utah and the Big 12 conference. Are they going to be a part of this, or will they kill the deal? Because I guarantee you that private equity company is going to ask for a lot longer commitment than 2031. That's number one. Supposedly, with the payout, that means that we're going to be very close to the Big Ten media rights. So we're going to be making the same amount of revenue, which is about $70 million for the media rights. So that means now UCF and the Big 12 can be competitive with the SEC and Big 10. And I think that's really what Brett Yormark is trying to do, is close the gap so we can stay competitive and remain in the conversation and not get left behind, right? I think that's the ultimate goal with this. Now, the difference is, with the recent agreement that the NCAA has gone over, there's a limit of 20% of league media rights to be able to pay players for these salaries. So we'd still be below that because it'd be coming from private equity, right? So we wouldn't be able to compete on salary with the Big Ten and the SEC. So the question is what's our best use of that capital? To me, for UCF right now, it's get as many facilities as you can if this goes through, and bone up on those facilities as quickly as you can, because you're not going to be able to pay it on salary. That's that, and some of it might go into the NIL. What do you guys think the best use of that capital would be? And first of all, did I explain it in a way that makes sense?
Well, I'm pretty familiar with private equity, so yeah, I hope so. Let's ask Nobra, see what he scrolls in. So
I'm just imagining the Brett Yormark standing in front of Mark Cuban and Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank and talking about all this. But
yeah, so here's the thing. I like the innovative way to try to infuse funding into the conference, because we have no other potential options, right? We already have the media rights, and honestly, he jumped the gun on that in a good way, because I think one of the two was going to go, either the Pac-12 or the Big 12. And I think the Big 12 actually getting quickly into it and saying, yeah, and the Big 12 waffling is why the Big 12 is gone.
You mean the Pac-12 waffling?
Pac-12, sorry, yes. The Pac-12 waffling and thinking they can get bigger and better when there was the blanket or whatever was pulled out from under them. So because of that, we're in a good holding pattern. I think there's only like 7 years and a look in after 5 or 4, which is good. But again, show me the money. How are we going to compete at a higher level? So I'm not loving it for the same reasons that others probably feel. And typically, nothing private equity goes really well for the company who is being leveraged with it. But to me, it really depends on how much of a control and interest they have and are able to push upon the conference. If it's, we have these other companies in our portfolio, and I think the portfolio that that presented it was from Luxembourg, if I remember correctly, or somewhere over in Europe. So if they,
I don't know if it was Luxembourg or Switzerland. I can't remember.
yeah, so
But it's not the Middle East. You've heard a lot about that with Live and all that other stuff. It's not the Middle East.
It's yes. Busta Rhymes had a song about that. So I would say I'm interested. I'd love to know more details. If we were to get some of this money, I mean, you have to put it into the things that would help us as a sports program sustain. It can't just, at the core of it, we don't have the same facilities as most of the SEC and the Big 10 teams because they had all this money beforehand and they built all these things. But the reality is, a student athlete now, probably that's a nice to have. What you want is money. And what you want to do is leverage whatever you can get now to get into the NFL, if we're talking football, because that's where the real money is. And if you're not going to get to the NFL, okay, understood. Get your money now. But those who believe they have a shot, they want great mentors. They want connections. They want to be on TV. They want to get the numbers they need and show the maturity and the deliverables to get out. That's why Burdell, he might be a 3 and out. I think it also gives us. I think it also gives us the leverage. It gives the schools leverage to pay higher amounts for those coaches and to be actually be able to compete for that, because you can see how much of a difference we said earlier that Gus Malzahn makes for UCF recruiting, right? Yeah. Think about that. And I honestly, where I think this is all going is I think Brett Yormark realizes that there's a race to 3. And I think he's positioning himself for capital to buy ACC properties. I think he knows that FSU and Clemson is a foregone conclusion. We all know that the media companies have said, even to the SEC, we're not going to pay you anymore to acquire any more brands. So now they are going to leverage this cash as the Big 12 conference to be able to leverage the media buyouts to be able to acquire the ACC schools. I think this is in business terms, you've got White Knight, you've got a leverage buyout. I think more than anything else, this is a leverage buyout per se of the remaining ACC brands that will be up for auction when FSU, and it's not an if, it's when FSU and Clemson leave. So that's what I think this is more than anything else. I think it's less about evening the playing field for the schools. I think, Brett Yormark's job is to think about the Big 12 conference and making sure that it's solvent and his job is not in jeopardy. I think the sweetener for the schools is, hey, you're going to get paid a little extra. But what he really wants is that extra capital to be able to acquire more schools. That way, whatever that bottom line number is, right, for the number of schools in a conference, because there's going to be a maximum on it, and whoever gets left out gets left out. I think he's trying to protect the Big 12 and make sure it does not go the way of the Pac-12 when the SEC and the Big 10 start pulling schools from the ACC. That's what I think this is.
I mean, you guys have said a lot, and you guys have said it.
We always say a lot. That's the problem.
Well, on this topic, you guys are a little bit more versed than I am on it. But that being said, I do agree with you on as far as where we should spend the money. I think I would just slightly alter the word facilities and just alter that to infrastructure in the athletic department, in the sense that, like, not just build. I'm not just talking about buildings here, like making sure that we have enough. I mean, like, enough staff to make these athletes. I'm just going to drop the word now. I'm going to drop the word student now. These athletes, as comfortable as they are, as they possibly can be on campus, and make their life better, because I do think that matters just as much. Well, maybe not just as much, but it's a pretty close second to, I understand what you're saying, Josh, like, NIL and getting money and getting yours now. And like, you don't know if you're going to be there next year and all that stuff. Yes, it's important to these athletes, but they also have to live on campus. They have to, or live near or on campus. They have to be with their teammates every day. They have to be with their coaches every day, their advisors, and anything that money can do to help make that life and that reputation of UCF even better for those young men, and women. Like, I think it's a really good thing and a good source to use that money for, especially if it's, based on the new rules of salary cap or whatever you want to talk about. We kind of have to spend that money elsewhere. So that's kind of my main thought on is to make sure that the infrastructure, which is, there's no surprise that it's lacking compared to even other Big 12 schools,
they've just had so much of a head start. I mean, and
that's what I mean. I agree with you. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a surprise to anybody. It's yes, because of all the reasons that we could go on for another 45 minutes about, but the infrastructure of UCF athletics program is lacking compared to our conference mates, and this money would allow us the ability to upgrade that and potentially upgrade it quickly. So I'm all for that, and I would agree with you that that's where we would need to put that money if it were injected into the UCF athletics program.
Yeah, and the big thing, to Josh's point, and my point, as far as control and PE, right, being involved. The big question I have is, how much control do they have over over the conference now, right? So, this is going to put an impetus on the schools. You either perform and you're helping build the brand so that it returns more on its investment in marketing dollars and commercials and all the other ways that the Big 12 can monetize the brands that are under its umbrella. Because ultimately, if do they have control? I mean, here's a real question. We always talked about ESPN and Fox saying who could join. Will they say, hey, these people are a laggard on the conference's worth, so I'm going to drop them because they aren't bringing anything in sports? They're not winning. They're not competing for championships. Do you as a school get dropped by the PE company? Before, the only people that have done that is, UConn, I think, got dropped. Temple got dropped. UMass got dropped, right? So those were very isolated incidents in the past.
It's another reason why the SEC would never do it, because Vanderbilt would never have it.
Yeah. Well, they at least bring baseball. Right. I mean, they've got a pretty good baseball program, but let's say you are Ole Miss, right? Or for us, let's say you're Houston. Well, you can't say Houston because they're bringing it in basketball. Yeah. Let's say you are, I don't know, Vanderbilt, right? Like, how long? Well, Vandy again brings baseball too. So how long does that exist before the PE company says, hey, look, we're paying them all this money, or this is part of our investment, but they're not adding any return on investment? You are commoditizing schools when it comes from the conference's perspective. What's that threshold, right? Where do you say, hey, we're not taking a chance on these folks anymore? And we're just going to kick them out of the conference because they aren't returning anything on their investment. So that's the thing I'm afraid of for UCF, because we're an emerging brand. We're a growth stock, have been and will be, and ESPN has consistently voted in our favor for that, right? But a PE company is looking for a 5-year return. If UCF and Gus Malzahn trips up, and let's say they're 6-6 for the next, God forbid, 6 or 6 for the next 3 years or 4 years, right? do they turn around and say, hey, look, this school's not, or look at like someone like Baylor or TCU. Hey, Baylor, you've had a few bad years. You aren't bringing anything to the football field, and your school's small, and your fan base is small, and you don't bring a major metro, which that's an advantage for UCF, right? Do you drop Baylor? The idea that the identity of individual schools versus conference, and I'm not saying that they would do that, but I'm just saying that's an open question, because they're thinking about it. It's their job to make the highest return on investment, the PE companies, that they can possibly make. And traditionally in the business world, they will make decisions that make the most money for their investors. Those portfolio managers will, versus they don't care about college athletics. All they care about is their return on investment. And if it makes more sense to get rid of Baylor, to do that, why would we keep them? I think UCF's actually in a better position for that, but I'm thinking, like, how much influence do they have over the decisions? And that's the danger for the Big 12 conference, right? And that's why I also think it's advantageous for all the teams in the conference, because typically this is cyclical over time as far as performance is concerned, right? Schools have some great years, have some down years, whatever. They're going to be on a time clock, and they're going to be under pressure to perform. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that works. And, the schools are going to want some longer term commitments for themselves as well, to make sure they protect themselves from that as well. So it's going to be really, really interesting with PE involved, if they are involved. And is it a short-term gain for a long-term detriment for the individual schools in the conference? And then how much of a say do they have in the decisions of the schools? That's the other question. UCFAA, right, is a separate entity that's part of the conference, and they're the ones signing the conference contracts, right? So what if UCFAA doesn't perform well, and then all of a sudden we get booted? Are they signing their own death warrants or potential death warrants? There's a lot more questions when you get PE involved, because now it's a business decision. It's not about college football anymore. And I think, to your point earlier, Ben, that's the challenge that you have when you're dealing with professionalizing college sports.
Right.
Josh,
there's a totally new playing field. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's a lot of talk right now. We'll just have to see. I mean, and to your point, Roger, what does 20% mean?
Yeah, there's so many variables that we can only theorize, right? We need a little more concrete, and that's really where I think we're at. The idea is interesting enough to show us the money, right? And we should figure out what we get for that money, because, like you were saying, we might be giving up a little too much. Perhaps.
Yeah.
It's all about the control. That's my concern. Whenever you're dealing with PE, they're in it to make money for their fund. They're not in it for the good of college sports. So that'll be really, really interesting. All right. So let's go ahead and pivot again. I have a feeling we're going to pick up that topic again later on. Something right up Ben's alley. Our resident Dawkins proponent got. I'm just joking with you. We talked about what was happening with all these guys being signed. Mustafa TM being an example. All these other guys being signed and not hearing anything about the contract and knowing that they were going back and forth. And when we were having those conversations, we said, hey, we feel like it's going to be around $1.8 million and about a 2-year deal. Well, the contract has finally been autographed and is public. Johnny Dawkins was signed through 2026, 2027. He had $2 million in 2024 and 2025. up to $2.2 million in 2026 and 2027. The details were finally hashed out on Friday. So as we suspected, Johnny Dawkins had not agreed to an agreement while all of this was happening. I think they had a agreement in faith that, hey, we were going to extend them, and he felt confident enough about it that he was able to get some fairly good players to campus. And I do think also the fact that he was able to get those players to campus is a reason why this contract was signed. If he didn't have Mikey Williams and some of these other folks that he had, that he was able to convince to come on campus, I don't think he certainly wouldn't have gotten 2 million or 2.2 million. I think he would have been closer to 1.6 to 1.8. So the details were hashed out on Friday. According to the contract, the base salary is $500,000 with a guaranteed annual compensation of $2 million for this upcoming season. That increases to $2.1 million in 2025, 2026, and $2.2 million for 2026, 2027. He is eligible for an annual merit pay increase based on his performance at the discretion of the athletic director. So they can increase his contract amount if he does well. His buyout is 50% of his guaranteed salary, or $1 million this upcoming season, and 0% for 2025 to 2026. As we said, it would be favorable with the buyout, with regard to the buyout when we talked about this. The final year of his contract is also not guaranteed. So this was, I think this was that third year was the sticking point, right? I think that was the sticking point. And I think that final year not being guaranteed, I think they probably front loaded his other 2 years in order to be able to negotiate the buyout down, and also to be able to negotiate. He got a higher salary for the first 2 years to offset the fact that his contract is not guaranteed for the quote unquote third, although he would have gone into this next season with a contract. He is eligible for performance bonuses up to $500,000 per year, and academic bonuses up to $10,000. So if he starts putting this team together and they start doing well, not only will he earn himself a longer contract, but this was a show me contract. This put UCF with no buyout in the second year. They said, you show me next year. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think that's what you're seeing. And this was when I see these contract terms, I think about Johnny Dawkins trying to secure part of his future, and UCF saying, show me, because we're not showing you any commitment beyond those 2 years. So very, very interesting. Ben, any thoughts on that from your perspective and from a player's perspective? I mean, although we know that, it's basically a free market as far as players are concerned now anyway in basketball.
Yeah, as far as players go, I think that's I think, if we laid out these terms as we were really diving into it at the end of basketball season this past season, or just a couple months ago, I think that we look at these terms and still say now, at least I say, it's very favorable terms for UCF, and it's not terrible. It's not a terrible contract for Johnny Dawkins either. It's just he gets a raise, with the step up in conference, step up in competition, a surprising, in some cases, year one in the conference as far as
it's not. In some cases, it was surprising. We all said, "Hey."
I'm only tempering it, Roger, because we obviously felt like we could have done about 3 or 4 games better. But regardless, it's kind of one of those things. We had a lot of surprises this year, but we also felt like we could have done even better, which is not a raised expectations thing or a unrealistic expectations thing. It's just actually what we saw on the court. And so I think it's a really favorable contract for UCF, and it's one that allows some form of foundation for Dawkins to continue to try to build the program with, where he's not just some sort of lame duck that is hanging out there on a 1-year contract and who knows what could happen after that. Getting Mustafa Thiam to reclassify, I think, is a huge deal for him. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think that 3rd year was the sticking point. I don't know necessarily he would have not gotten the extension if he didn't bring in some of the recruits that he has. But I'm not sure if I'm quite on board with that. But by the same token, I think we kind of expected he was going to get an extension. It's just a matter of what the terms were. One thing I definitely agree with is I think that one of the reasons why I don't know if it was announced exactly when he signed this, or maybe he signed it a little while ago and it was just announced now. I don't know. So say he even signed it just recently when it was announced. I think that biggest back and forth, and I honestly think it was probably just agent and Terry Mahadra and like the suits in the room more so than it was Dawkins himself. But it just it feels like that buyout was probably that buyout in the year 3 was probably a lot of back and forth and negotiations on that particular one. And I think I agree with you as far as how they kind of landed on that buyout and the way it was. And honestly, that buyout is extremely favorable for UCF. And whereas if we're not, seeing the type of progress that we want to see after year 1, certainly not getting any better after year 2, it's we can part ways and everybody's just moving on in the way that they need to.
I think the timing part is interesting for a couple of reasons. I think for Johnny Dawkins' representation, it behooved him. He got more leverage for 2 reasons. One, the longer it goes into the season, the less coaching candidates that were out there for them to be able to choose from. So that gives them more leverage, right? And I also think the fact that he was able to bring in the recruiting class that he did this year was also leverage, right? Because it said to them, hey, look, I've got your first 5-star on campus that's going to sign on, right? And that's huge in itself for our basketball program. Let's not diminish that, right?
Right.
But on top of that, I've got Mikey Williams. I've got other well-known players. I brought in a bunch of scorers. I was able to bring enough people in, and I think that's why we acquiesced. And it's not necessarily whether he would have got the contract. I think he would have. I just think it's the dollar amount. And this is kind of where I was going with that as far as the players were concerned. UCF had to have a coach next year, had to have him under contract, and it had gone so late in the season that they were going back and forth that they were going to sign him no matter what for 2 years. Which is what we said all along. Literally, we've said this all along, right? But I think the reason why he got what he got for the increase was quite simply because of the recruiting class that he got in. But to your point, it still allows UCF an exit, and 50%, like a $1 million buyout is
nothing, way
less than what the rest of the Big 12 coaches are getting. So it's still favorable for UCF. And it gets us, when what we talked about before was it gets us into that next contract cycle where we're starting to earn more income, right? Because again, next sports athletic season, we're still getting $18 million, right? And after that, that gives us the ability to get the full share of the Big 12 conference revenue. And I think that's really what UCF's motivation was for that. So that, I honestly think that his representation knew that they had him by the
they had him
horns. By the
horns. Boo.
Well, we have the cows by the horns. And for Texas, horns down. But at the end of the day, my point with all of this is that, the longer that this went on, the worse position from a leverage perspective that UCF had. And at the same time, they still got a deal that makes sense at the macro level for UCF in case, when we start earning that higher revenue dollar. So all in all, I think it's a win-win.
And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, he's still one of the lowest paid coaches salary wise in the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, it's not like they made him like the top 5 highest paid coach of the Big 12. You know what I mean? So
yeah, 100%. It's still on the bottom rung, but regardless of what you feel about Johnny Dawkins, this was a lifeline for Johnny Dawkins in the sense that says, "Hey, prove it." Number one.
Sure.
And number 2, it was a lifeline for UCF to get us to where we're making a full conference share. And we can make some different decisions if we need to on the head coaching position at UCF. Now, if he falls flat on his face this season, which that's a big possibility because it takes a while to get all these guys to play together. If he does that this season, then I could see us exercising that right, because the following athletic season will be getting a big pay increase.
Right.
$1
is going to mean less.
Yeah, $1 million buyout.
Right.
Yeah. So, Josh, any thoughts on that before we move on?
No, I think you had it right. This definitely is a show don't tell type of contract. You're putting the ball, there you go, putting the ball back in Johnny's court, and you have a year or 2. Let's see what happens, see how it gels, and if it does well, the Johnny and UCF have options, and I think so. That's the best. To me, it's the best for both worlds, and it's good to get this out here so recruits and other people, they see the commitment, at least in the short term. So I think it's great. I don't think any of us expected Johnny Dawkins to not be here next year or even perhaps the year after that, with all the recruiting and with the time frame. If you want to just crater a sport, fire someone near the season in this era of sports, where you will have the Oklahoma State, Oregon State women's softball team, the entire team left, that could happen. So yeah.
Well, even going into before these transfer
reasons, not you can it would be a basketball decision at that point, which because you certainly wouldn't do that as a basketball decision, not at this point.
We just can't afford it. We can't afford anything else. And that was my point. When we were talking about this before was, we just can't afford to go get another coach right now. And we're buying ourselves time to be able to make the right decision at that time with more revenue. Yeah. And I do expect, we've got, like I said, we've been talking about this billionaire who is basically paying for St. John's basketball program. It gives us time to further ingratiate him into the athletic program and get him involved. And I expect if we do move on from Johnny Dawkins a couple of years from now or a year from now, I expect him to be very heavily involved in who we hire next.
I would say I'll one more thing this, and then I'm done. It gives us time to see how good Johnny can both recruit and thank you. It was an easy Dan. I had to do it. It gives us time to see how he can recruit in the Big 12 with the full Big 12 name, with all the money that's starting to be put into it with the extra donors. I know he's been here a while, but let's be honest, he wasn't recruiting with the Big 12 behind his back, and we're seeing some of the differences. So let's see how he can show it.
Okay, and on that note, the cookies are done and Josh is finished. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. And that's a little grammar joke for those of you that are out there for our resident UCF professor. Josh, the floor is yours. Do you have a Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week for us this week?
Well, yes, I do, Roger, and I can say it a little bit because my voice is back. Hey, how you doing? Okay, so I'm actually going to change this up for the summer. I'll try to see how I weave these in. We were talking about this before the episode. They're not going to be completely, but I'm thinking boring UCF fact of the week. Things you probably know, but things you may not 100% know.
What an exciting segment. The boring facts of the
boring-
week.
You know what?
Way to sell it,
Tell
Josh.
everybody to turn it
You're
off
right. Hold on.
now.
I have to
Oh
go.
my goodness.
I have to do another one. This is the boring UCF fact of the week. Before Nitro,
All right.
there
all right.
were 4.
Okay, I think we're having some more technical issues with Josh. I don't know
Come
what's going
on,
on.
seriously. It's, let me do the shtick for a second. Geez,
Uh,
it's you. I guarantee you, people are going to be listening in their cars, and they're going to go, "What's going on?" They're going to turn up the. I was going to say radio, but whatever you're listening to, and because they're like, Josh doesn't normally sound like Ben Stein. So before Nitro, there are 4 different mascots, named mascots at UCF. Okay, they had 4 names. Name the 4 pre-Nitro mascots.
Vinny the Vulture.
Ding.
Someone the Shark. They were being considered when Nitro was going through, so you're not counting that.
Like in like a UCF newspaper as the mask, like enough to say that they were. You've heard of these.
Okay.
There's only one that's iffy.
All right. So Vinny the Vulture for sure.
Yes.
I got nothing.
There's the most obvious one. There's one that's obvious.
Is it like
wasn't there not a squirrel one?
Is there literally a Citronaut or like Johnny Citronaut?
Well, yeah, Citronaut, obviously. Yeah, Citronaut. Okay. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm out. Costanza exit. I'm out, guys. See you later.
All right. So we got Citronaut and Vinny the Vulture. That's all I know, dude.
Okay. So in 68, Citronaut. We all know and love the Citronaut. The first unofficial mascot.
I'll let you down, Nobra. I'm sorry.
Okay. Vincent or Vinny the Vulture, right? Vincent the Vulture, inspired by the vultures on campus, proposed by a night nurse at the campus health center, but never officially adopted. But, these were names that we heard of, so we'll give that. Did you know that before we got to Nitro, we had 2 other night names? We had the Knight, or Knights of Pegasus, or Knights was the mascot of the student vote in the 70s. And then debuting in the 80s, Sir Wins-A-Lot was the night-themed mascot for Nitro. So, not quite interesting, but
I mean, it's Sir Wins-A-Lot still better than the Stanford tree. I mean,
I love the tree. No, I don't.
Oh my gosh, how do you love the tree? It's literally like the worst Christmas tree outfit that you would ever see.
Right. Have you seen the tree do ridiculous things? It's like Western Kentucky and that blob eating things. The Hilltopper dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. It's fun. I love the tree.
Well, it couldn't be any worse than the Golden Hurricane, though. I'm just saying. God.
That's like golden emoji, right? I'm trying to figure out.
I was wondering if you were going to a rain shower or something.
No.
Because that's what I think of every time I see that.
It's a golden swirl poop emoji. I mean, it's what it is.
I agree. All right. No, this was worth it. Nobra said Roger's not a fan of grade school Christmas plays. 100% true. And Christmas trees to go along with it. Because literally the tree looks like it was made by a grade school
I love
kid.
it. I don't know. I love it. It's I like that. I like the Rice Band that does things that are not offensive, but like to taunt the other teams when they know they're going to lose in football most of the time. I love those small scat bands that just do fun stuff and annoy
Josh
others.
Was a fan of Glycerin as well, I heard.
Yeah, well, I didn't think he was. Yes, my name is my middle name is Ebenezer. But yes, I did not know if you wanted to include Glycerin because it was like a co-mascot.
Well,
it wasn't
before Nitro. That's the only reason why I didn't try to guess.
Yeah, because Nitro and Glycerin were at the same time. Right. I mean, you could also consider. Oh gosh, what's the little mini horse? Why can't I think? Nugget. You could also consider Nugget, which, by the way.
Nugget's awesome.
I love Nugget, So keep Nugget away from the glue factory and keep Nugget as part of the UCF brand.
I agreed. And to the glycerin point, the concept of a partner to Nitro, yes. What they made, and I was on campus. I have a picture somewhere of me and Nitro and Glycerin at Spirit Splash on the stage somewhere, wet after being in the pond. And I don't know where it is. It'd be physical. I'll have to see. But I mean, it was not good. It was not good. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's poor execution. Right. It was a good concept, though.
Yeah. So as you can tell, we do not have any quick updates on the UCF Sports that Alan does not watch this week. One, and I remissed that I didn't say this, but let me say this to everyone. One, happy Father's Day for those of you that were celebrating this past week. Alan is in Europe donning his UCF gear, so I hope he has a great time. We will see him hopefully next week. I did have to do the show notes, so if you have any complaints about that this week, you can complain to my inbox. Make sure that you're checking us out on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, any of the podcast channels that you like to listen to. Remember, we're always more entertaining at either 1.5 times or 0.5 times, because if you ever watch this on 0.5 times, we sound really drunk. So outside of that, I just wanted to say, make sure you like, subscribe, hit us up with comments if there's anything that you found engaging. I really think this PE thing is going to be a big point of the conversation moving forward, and what it means for UCF and the Big 12 Conference. Go Knights and
charge on.
There we go. Hit it in sync. It's tearing